The trades you make this week may just be the most critical trades you make for the entire season. No, that's not hyperbolic, but with the injuries to a Nathan O'Driscoll, to a Will Day, this week, your SuperCoach side needs you to nail the moves. You got two popular guys out and we are at best 22, meaning just the one poor score is going to fall out. So you got to nail the moves this week if you want to get to the critical cash generation, the critical scoring elements you need to succeed in 2025. But don't worry, here at the Coaches Panel, we got you covered with our top 10 trade targets for the week in SuperCoach. You're ready to go? Let's kick you off. Number one, should not surprise you, Riley Bice. Was only owned in about 20% of teams last week, but already he's knocking on the door of that 50%. And with every day, that data point is moving. He's just over 200,000. It is not too late, but going at an average of 90, we know from a SuperCoach points per minute, he's absolutely knocking the lights out. And with a break even that is almost negative 100, this guy is headed towards a price point. It's crazy to say in SuperCoach, but a 400,000 is absolutely within his capacity, especially if he knocks out another 80 or 90 plus score. You just got to make this move this week. The good news is you've got multiple avenues to get there, whether it be through someone in the midfield like a Day, like a Nevitt, like a O'Driscoll, and then you flip a Sinclair type into the midfield to cover it. You could do that. Or a De Koning and a Fraser also sit in that pocket of options, let alone what you could do with flex. There's just no excuse as far as I'm concerned. Last week, I understood where or why you might not have got to him. It didn't work out for you. You need to correct course this week. The number one trade target. There is no excuse. If you're making any trades this week, this is the guy you must get into. Make no mistake about it. My number two trade target for the week. Again, we're going to start to see divergence of trades from teams here, because if you're not, for example, a Will Day owner, you probably might not have the cash just yet to be able to go and do an upgrade, whether it be for structural reasons or others. You might just need to keep that cash generation tipping over. And again, at time of recording, we don't know what's happening with Lindsay. He's training Thursday, but at time of recording, we don't know. Never. Is it another week or not? O'Driscoll, we know it's weeks. So the reason my number two is a money maker is because I still think there's enough teams that are still trying to generate cash before genuinely hitting upgrade season. Some teams are there, and they're probably teams that nailed Riley Bice last week. So who's my number two trade target? It's West Coast Eagles, Clay Hall. He's at that $129,500 price point, going at that high 70s average, got a high negative 70s break even, and super lowly owned even at this stage of the round. I just think if you're looking to downgrade out of a Noddy type and you don't have the ability to do DPP because you've already got Bice somewhere else, this is the play to go to me. He should have ripping job security. He hasn't been amazing by any means, but he's been solid and consistent in the role and the functions that he's delivered for West Coast. And they clearly have to keep giving these kids an opportunity. So to me, he's got decent to good job security. Alongside that, he's shown decent scoring. And so from a SuperCoach perspective, outside of knocking lights out like Bice has, he's done everything we can want over these last couple of weeks. So to me, the number two trade target for this week, staying in that cash generation space, is a Clay Hall. If you're a Bice owner, Hall's your number one priority. And like I said, you've got plenty of avenues to get out to access cash. I think most teams this week in SuperCoach will be using a boost. And as a result of that, almost regardless of being a Bice owner before the round ended last week or not, you should be able to do at least one upgrade this week. And now that upgrade could be off Fraser, could be off O'Driscoll, could be off De Koning. Sure. Fine, no problems. But I think most of us should be able to hit one of them and nail it well. There is one more kind of halfway house option I want to give you. And that is if you kind of want your cake and eat it too. And by that, I mean someone that still presents value, that presents an on-field scorer, which in best 22, we're not losing multiple poor scores out. So if you're like, well, I'm not flushed for cash, and I want to get rid of the guys like Stone. I want to get rid of Wicks. I want to get rid of Warner. Want to jump off Berry. Want to jump off Kako. Whatever it is, this is the guy that I think could still, A, be a good on-field scorer, and B, make you a ton of cash. That's Ryan Maric. Just over 320,000. Went up about 50, 60K last week. Still has that negative break even. And importantly, scored pretty decently in a really challenging fixture. That Giants team was just pillaging the goals, and there were times where it was just, I remember at the start of the second quarter and for big chunks of the fourth, it was just dominating through the midfield, winning stoppage, getting it at clearance, moving the ball through handball receives and transition scoring into the goal area and kicking goals and just Eagles not touching the ball for 30 seconds straight and no opportunity to defend. And so he had to play a little accountable due to the lack of height that they had, but also the height that the Giants have. It's not as bad over these next couple of weeks. Not too many teams outside of the Giants and probably the Crows offer that level of so many tall threats that the Giants do. I think he's a ripping pick still. You can go in there. Like I said, it's in that halfway house space, a little bit of money on top of your Kako, your Berry, your Wicks, your whomever, and you can still generate cash. And I still think there are hundreds sitting within him. I think he could get that price up to near 450 with a few things going his way. He's got the role, he's got the kick-ins, and he's hitting targets, which is not what you could say too often about West Coast players at the moment. So to me, he still is a high trade priority. But if you're looking to get somebody in that could be a captaincy option and has dropped out a little bit of cash, then for me, probably the number one premium mid I'd be looking to bring in this week is my number 4 trade target, Caleb Serong. He's now under 600,000. He's already going at over an average of over 110, but his break even sits in that average spot. And beautifully now, he's got a matchup this week that should be quite favourable. Richmond have been gifting up a ton of points. Now, it's not as good as a West Coast inside midfield matchup, let's be honest, but it's still a really strong one. We've started to see a couple of decent weeks from Caleb now, and we know historically in SuperCoach, 150, 160, 180 is within his capacity. And it's not just this week, it's almost 4 of the next sort of 6 games for the Dockers. I actually really quite like, not just from a historical 2024 inside mid-run data point, but as we're seeing emerging trends for 2025, it's still looking good here for Caleb Serong. So to me, I think this is a nice matchup for him. Feel like Fremantle could, should, and will feast. And what I know, and I've seen this trend about Richmond, right, is they have games where they're competitive for 3 quarters, and we saw that on the weekend. They hung around Brisbane, and then when Brisbane needed to, they flexed their muscle and just knocked them off. They didn't have to function too hard. Whereas for Freeman, I feel like they're going to look at this game in a different lens to Brisbane. They're going to be hunting possession in serious ways, because this could be a percentage boosting movement game. And we are seeing this up and down. It's rare that kids, which Richmond have a raft of, can put it out back-to-back weeks and for 4 to 8 to 10 quarters in a row. So if there's anywhere near of a dip from Richmond after they were pretty good last week against Brisbane, I think they could get exposed pretty hard this week on Gather Round. That's why for me, if I'm trading into any premium mid this week, I feel like I'm going to get the best payoff out of Serong, and I'm getting it under 600K, where he hasn't been for a while. My number 5 trade target is Harry Sheezel. Again, he's been solid to start the year, but he's not been amazing. And you picked him at that price point to be amazing. A lot of the competition still have him. 6 out of 10 coaches already are Harry Sheezel owners. But the reason he sits in this trade targets episode for me this week is kind of twofold. Number 1 is for 75% of the competition that didn't own Riley Bice before this weekend. It's an absolute must and Monty trade. And so 2 popular avenues a lot of people are maneuvering via is out of a Fraser and De Koning, taking 1 down to Bice, and then you should absolutely have the money to go up and get yourself a Harry Sheezel. So from an ease of accessibility, that's why for me, Harry sits in that space. And again, he's got a break even of 111, which is pretty much his average, which is fantastic. The other avenue that sits through this here is He did have a pretty dynamic role adjustment last week. Throughout 2025, prior to round 4, he'd been playing midfield and half forward, to the point where there'd been questions. Is he going to pick up forward status? He's not, but it was at least a consideration in the community for SuperCoach. Whereas now last week, he was still around the ball through the mids, but instead of sitting off half forward and pushing up, he was at half back and pushing up. It's how he got so many uncontested possessions, easy outlet, uncontested marks. We know those aren't hugely and highly favoured in SuperCoach, but just the sheer volume of ball and the playmaking he was able to create was the result in such a good score for us last week. So I think we've got these two parallel universes colliding beautifully for Harry Sheezel. One is a rookie that's here, two mid prices that are in the quote unquote failed or topped out category that are relatively popular across the formats. And then you've got a guy who's pretty much as low as he's going to go. Again, it's good value for coaches, not crazy value, but good value for coaches. So I'm very, very happy to trade into Sheezel at this point if I wasn't an owner. The pathways and the reasonings and now the role are good enough for me to comfortably jump on. So that's my top 5. Starts with Bice, then it hits Hall, then it is Maric, then it is Serong, and then Harry Sheezel. That's my top 5 trade targets for the week. But do you need a few more? Let's give you a couple more. My number 6 trade target this week is the Hornet, Jason Horne-Francis. One of the keys to success in SuperCoach, because ultimately this is a trading game. Your starting squad matters, but it's what you do in season with the trades you've got that ultimately puts you in positions to win the money and to win your league, depending on what your focus is going for. He's got a break even of 62. You've avoided paying up for him. He's already leaked some cash, and now he's shown that the scoring is still there. People that didn't start with a Jason Horne-Francis, let's be honest for a moment, don't use the knowledge you now have as foresight. Go back a month. Geez, you were nervous, weren't you? When you looked at the fixture, when you looked at what this start of year looked like for Port, it was, he could start 120. He was looking so good in the preseason. We know that's within his realms. That's what he did, a monster for us last week for owners. That was what you were fearing you would get multiple weeks of. Well, it hasn't hurt you now. He's dropped some cash. He's now in a very affordable space where he's under 500K, and I don't see him getting any cheaper from now to the end of the year. And you've dodged the bad scores, and you've only really been hurt once, which was last week. To me, this is a great chance. And yes, you probably don't need another forward right now, but the beauty of the flex position means he sits in that spot right now for you. So to me, I'm very, very happy to talk about him here. I actually quite like it as a trade target this week. So I'm pretty happy to jump into that for you through there. My number 7 option, Andrew Brayshaw. We just spent a few moments talking about the role that sits there and the fixture that sits there for Fremantle with Caleb Serong. Copy and paste for Brayshaw, except he's had a better start to the season than Serong. He's not getting as many outlet marks as he previously had, but the other scoring elements are there protecting. He is impacting the game in incredible ways. He's knocking on that door of a 120 average. And again, he's comparably priced to Serong, but he hasn't done anything wrong just yet. I'd really like him as an option this week. I'd be shocked if he goes anything under 130 this week. Remember what guys like McCluggage did last week? Yeah, that's what I think Brayshaw is. While it's more the outlet ball movers that are scoring well against Richmond, often it's the halfback. It's why you probably chased or wanted to own Sorko last week. We saw with McCluggage, it's actually ball movements that get in and around the ground and not just at the source and stoppage scorers that are scoring well against this Richmond team. Brayshaw fits that model beautifully. And with Noddy out, with Young likely back in, I think we could see an even bigger boost coming his way. So to me, I actually really like this as a trade option. 3 more options to go for you. Are you ready for them? Number 8, Harvey Langford. Look, he wasn't great last week. I ain't going to lie. But the reality is that under 200,000 with a negative break even and with unbelievable job security, I think this is someone we could still look at. Now, it's not my number one to be going there. Again, I'd get Hall ahead. I'd absolutely get Bice ahead. But if you're already in that spot and you need a mid downgrade, this is still a play because there's nothing wrong with a slow build SuperCoach rookie. Nothing wrong with it at all. I think it's a genuine play here for you to be able to go and do that. I think, and probably could and would be making that move. So to me, I think you could make that move and jump into him. My number 9, I wrestled. I wanted to put him in my top 5, but I probably couldn't. And then he just kept slipping down the order. Kieran Briggs. Yeah, he's my number 9 trade target. This is what Flex has done for us beautifully, because historically we'd probably only be looking at him if we're jumping out of a Gorn or Cherry, which I'm not a huge advocate for in SuperCoach. I know you're going to make some money with that downgrade, but then you're doubling down on that lost money that they've both delivered for you. I know they've probably got some more to go, but you're doubling down on that lost cash. It's now a sunk cost. The price doesn't matter on a player unless you trade them out. But you're now trading them. Yeah, you're saving money and all those things. I get that. I would rather look to take Briggs and put him in the flex spot. Now we've got this option out like we didn't have a year ago, whereas 2 rucks, all you got, that's it. Now we can access one of these other ruckmen that are historically some of the better scoring roles in SuperCoach. It doesn't have to be a this week trade, but I think for coaches looking for creative outlets and options, he sits there. Again, for some coaches, they're running a bench right now with they know O'Driscoll won't play, Nevitt they're unsure about, and Lindsay they're hopeful, let alone if they've got a Hasty or a Camporelli. So you've got a little bit of cash here, but potentially some of these guys are going to be dead rooks this week for at least 2 weeks, if not for a couple of months. So to me, I think you can get into Briggs now, and he's a nice flex scorer. Remember, in flex, you don't get bench coverage. You do in your other lines. So just get that balance right with who you put in that spot. But to me, I think it's an absolute play. I think Kieran Briggs could be got next week too, perfectly fine if you'd like to do so. But this week, it's a pretty nice price, isn't it? And then the last guy I want to give you is a forward option. It's Isaiah Dudley. He's under that $100,000 price point. And again, the reason I'd probably advocate for Isaiah here is he's got a decent enough break even, scoring decent enough. Probably the reason I'd be pretty comfortable to advocate for him is, given his lower price point, man, those 60s really do pump that scoring and cash generation nicely for us. I'd probably only go near Isaiah if it was the way to get the upgrades that I really needed. Again, a Bice, a Hall, a Maric, albeit, there's like 250,000 difference in Maric to buy to Dudley. There's something about this Fremantle side that I feel like they're constantly changing a lot. And he's not doing anything wrong, but they're still nowhere near their best 22. Fife's not far away. We expect Young to be back. We expect Darcy to play this week. Jackson's out. They're still not quite there. And I'm just wondering and curious that, in 2 to 4 weeks' time, with everyone healthy and fit, does Isaiah fit into this best 22? I'm not sold that he's out of it, but I'm also not sold that he's safe either. So I'm happy to put him there. I think he's got relative enough job security for the next couple of weeks, but he's there as an option if you just need to outlet that cash that's on top of, again, one of those forward rooks that have topped out or almost topped out. It's fine. It's not one I love, but if it gets me to the primo upgrade I want, I'm happy to go for it because I think he's going to be solid enough. And so that's my top 10 trade targets for the week. Are they similar to yours? Are they a little different to yours? I'd love to know. Why don't you comment below and let me know what your SuperCoach trades are for this week. We hope you've enjoyed the episodes you've got for us on this channel, which, by the way, if you haven't subscribed or given this video a like, Friend, it takes you 2 seconds, but it makes a huge impact for us. And in fact, turn the notifications on too, because every single day between rounds, we are dropping an episode already this week. You've got this SuperCoach trade targets. If you play AFL fantasy, that's already on the channel. And the strategy session where we talk through all the big trade dilemmas and discussion points of the week. What do you do now that it's best 22 again? What do you do with Day, with Noddy? What are the rooks we should be prioritizing? What are the issue points we need to be focusing on? All those strategic decisions that sit there, we've already got a conversation about it. And before we even get into Gather Round, we'll drop another episode looking at the likely DPPs that are coming into the game for SuperCoach at the end of this round. Are we going to get some big changes to our positions? I think we could see upwards, if not over, 50 new positions added to the game for players. Could be huge. We got you covered with who I think are the big names you need to keep an eye on. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for commenting below. We appreciate you supporting the Coaches Panel, and we can't wait to be back chatting SuperCoach and, in fact, all fantasy footy with you here on the channel real soon.